I heard a little clink on the floor when I opened the passenger door, and that was all it took. One tiny sound, like a coin dropped on concrete. I looked down and saw gold with a small green stone. It took me a second to place it, the earring I gave her a decade ago, for our 10th anniversary. It was lying there next to the car seat, half hidden under the edge of the floor mat. I blinked. Just stood there. My fingers went cold. It's strange how something so small can slice right through your day. I was just there for her folder. She forgot it in the car. She was upstairs, probably putting on lipstick or checking her hair in the mirror before her next Zoom call. Nothing unusual. But in that instant, everything turned inside out. I reached down, picked it up, turned it in my hand. I remembered how proud I felt when I bought them for her. We didn't have much at the time, but I saved up. She liked the color green. Told me once it reminded her of some lake she used to visit with her parents. I wanted to surprise her, so I searched a few jewelry stores until I found the right shape and that particular shade of stone. I still see her face that night I handed her the small gift box. She teared up, said I shouldn't have spent that money. We kissed in the car. Then we drove home with the radio off, just quiet in the front seat, but it felt warm. The memory of it stung me now. She wasn't wearing these earrings that morning. She almost never wore them anymore. I remember asking her about it once. She said she was afraid of losing them. And yet here was one earring, sitting on the floor of the car we both used, exactly the thing she claimed she wanted to protect. Something didn't add up, and that feeling in my gut, like I'd swallowed a block of ice, started to grow. I looked around. The seat, the dashboard, the cup holders. Everything looked the same as always. Except there was a strong scent of perfume, sharper than usual. She wore perfume, but hers wasn't so heavy. I'd known her daily scent for years, the one she dabbed behind her ears. This smell was thicker, almost bitter in the small enclosed space. Made me cough. I stepped back and took a deeper breath. Then I saw a blanket tossed on the back seat, one I couldn't remember ever buying or folding, or even seeing. Could have been new. Could have been from the office. But I had a bad feeling about it. I told myself, don't jump to conclusions. But the earring in my hand, the perfume, the blanket, it felt like puzzle pieces sliding into place. Still, my mind tried to block it. You live with someone for a couple of decades, raise kids with them, build a life, and you don't just up and believe they're lying to your face. You want to be wrong. You'd rather be an idiot with a good marriage than a smart guy who's suddenly alone. So I shut the passenger door. Carefully put the earring in my pocket. Thought, I'll ask her. But I also knew how that talk might go. Denial. Confusion. Maybe tears. Maybe laughter at me for being paranoid. I wasn't sure I could handle any of it. I walked around to the driver's side, opened it up, and sat down. My hand almost trembled on the steering wheel. I looked at the radio, the little tchotchkes she kept in the cup holder. Then I noticed a receipt in the ashtray. We almost never used that ashtray for anything, so it stood out. I picked it up. The paper was crumpled, but not too badly. The words stared back at me, a motel name, date of checkout 2 days ago. I tried to remember if she'd been gone 2 days ago. She told me she was going to a conference. She left early in the morning, came back late. Tired, she said. Complained about the long drive, how the meeting took forever. But here it was, a motel. Not the name of her conference hotel. Different city entirely. I felt my face grow hot. My hands started sweating. I sat there for a full minute, just me in the car. That's all it took to know. I can't explain how the mind works when everything you trusted flips upside down. You get a numbness that spreads up your arms into your chest. Like a slow wave of shock that blocks all your usual reaction. I guess that's what it means when they say you see your life flash before your eyes. In that moment, it's not your whole life, it's the life you thought you had. I saw our wedding day, the births of our kids, the everyday dinners, the routine text messages, the small jokes we shared. It all went swirling in my head, but none of it made sense now. No tears came. No big meltdown. Maybe I was too stunned. All I felt was an emptiness, like something inside me just got yanked out by the roots. You know that moment when you realize you've been lied to, but you can't even start to process it? It's like standing on a frozen lake, hearing a crack. You can't see the crack yet, but you feel it under your boots. That was me. I stuffed the receipt in my pocket with the earring. Then I grabbed her folder from the back seat. It was one of those plain manila folders. Some kind of presentation inside, charts and notes. She'd asked me to get it for her because she was in a hurry. I shut the door gently, made sure it was locked, and walked back upstairs. She was in the living room, checking her phone. I remember her glancing up as I handed her the folder. She thanked me, gave me a little absent-minded smile. I forced a smile back. My mouth felt wooden. She asked if everything was okay. I said, "Yeah. Just needed a second to find it." She nodded and went back to her phone. I stood there, looking at her hair, the same color it had been for the last decade, maybe with more gray now. She was wearing a blouse I'd seen 100 times. She looked normal, the same. Except she wasn't. I wanted to say something right then. Something big. But I realized I had no words for this. I couldn't ask, "Why does our car smell like somebody else's perfume?" Or, "Where'd you get that new blanket in the back seat?" Or, "Why is there a motel receipt for the day you were at that conference?" Because I was afraid I'd look at her face and see it all confirmed. And once you cross that line, there's no going back. We'd be on the other side of the truth, and I wasn't ready to stand there yet. So I nodded, turned around, went back to my own business. The rest of the day I moved around the house like a guest. My son was in his room, doing homework. My daughter, well, she was off at college, so she wasn't there. The dog barked at a squirrel in the backyard. Normal. Everything was normal except my chest felt heavy as lead. I went outside to take out the trash, and I just sat on the porch steps for a while. The sky was bright, sun out, neighbors' kids shouting somewhere down the street. I breathed in, smelled cut grass. It seemed insane that the world was still turning the same way it always did. By evening, she was cooking something in the kitchen. I heard her talking to our son about a school project, telling him he needed to finish up in time for bedtime. The smell of onions sizzling in the pan drifted through the house. I heard her footsteps, heard the spoon clank against the counter. Then she called me to dinner like she had so many times before. "Dinner's ready." Those two words felt like an electric jolt. I got up, forced myself to the table. The meal tasted like cardboard. She asked me if something was wrong. I shrugged and said, "Stomach's a little off." She nodded sympathetically and asked if I wanted some medicine. I said no, I'd be fine. That night, I lay in bed, wide awake. She fell asleep next to me at some point, her breath slowing, her body curling in. I stared at the ceiling for hours, thinking about the earring, the motel receipt, that thick perfume. My mind replayed it like a broken record. And the question came, who else could it be? She worked with a team, had some new colleagues. She traveled sometimes for conferences. A lot of excuses here and there, late meetings, car trouble, calls that went on too long. It was all floating in front of my face, bits of a puzzle. My teeth clenched so hard my jaw started to ache. By 3 a.m., I sat up quietly, went to the living room, and turned on the TV with no volume. Just stared at the screen, but I wasn't watching. I was inside my own head, trying not to tear the house apart in anger or jump in the car and drive somewhere, anywhere. I kept telling myself, wait. Don't make a scene. I wasn't sure what I'd do next. But I knew nothing would ever be the same. That earring changed everything. I didn't sleep much that night. In the morning, I washed my face, looked in the mirror at the circles under my eyes, and forced myself to get dressed. She was already out the door before I even came downstairs. Said she had some early meeting. I almost laughed to myself. Another meeting. Another reason to leave the house. The boy was eating cereal at the kitchen table. I patted his shoulder, mumbled good morning, and left for work. But driving there, My hands gripped the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. I thought about letting the day pass quietly, pretending I didn't know anything, letting it build up inside. But I couldn't. I felt like a balloon ready to explode. Around lunchtime, I told my boss I needed to run an errand. I got in the car, looked up the address of her office. I knew her colleagues. I'd met them at company events. Just never had reason to be suspicious before. It took me 20 minutes to get there. I parked out front, turned off the engine, and sat for a second. My heart was hammering. There were glass doors at the entrance, people coming in and out. She wasn't there, I guess, maybe at that so-called meeting. But I hoped to find him. I hadn't put a name to it yet, but I had my suspicions. I'd heard her mention a co-worker, Greg, a few times. She called him helpful, or good with data, or something like that. Harmless office chatter. Now those little remarks rang in my head like warning bells. I walked in. The receptionist recognized me. I'd been there for holiday parties. She gave me a polite smile. I cleared my throat. "Is Greg around?" I said, trying to sound casual. She cocked her head, said, "Sure, let me see if he's in his cubicle." Then she pointed me down the hall. My stomach felt like a pit of acid. I forced myself to keep going, step by step. I found him by a desk, tapping on his computer. When he saw me, he smiled wide, like we were old buddies. I guess in some ways we were friendly. He stood up, extended his hand. "Hey man, what brings you here?" I asked if he could step outside for a minute. He looked a bit puzzled, but he shrugged and said, "Sure." We walked out through the glass doors to the parking lot. He was still smiling, like he thought maybe I was here to drop off baked goods or ask for a favor. That grin got under my skin so bad I felt my pulse throbbing in my neck. I didn't say a word. Didn't ask. Didn't accuse. The moment we were clear of the doors, I just snapped. My fist flew up and caught him square on the nose. He staggered back, eyes wide, shock crossing his face. Then I hit him again, this time on his cheekbone. It wasn't something I planned out carefully. It was just raw, physical anger. My body took over, and it felt like that second punch let some steam out of my skull. He stumbled, grabbing his face. A little blood trickled from his nose. He looked at me, stunned, not even defending himself. I was breathing hard. My knuckles hurt. He didn't say a word. The door behind us swung open, somebody yelled, "Hey, what's going on?" That snapped me back. I turned, walked to my car. Didn't run, didn't shout. Just got in, put the key in the ignition, and left. As I drove away, my hands were shaking. I kept checking the rearview mirror, half expecting him or security to come after me, but no one did. My jaw clenched, my chest felt like a drum. I didn't regret it. I didn't feel proud either. It was just something I had to do, or I would have exploded from the inside out. My mind was numb. I didn't replay the moment. I just drove, stared at the road. At some point, I realized my boss would be expecting me back. But I couldn't go. I found a diner off the highway, parked in back. Sat there for maybe an hour, letting my head cool. Ordered a coffee to go, drank it in the car. I wondered if he'd call her, if she'd text me, if the police would show up. I almost wanted them to. Maybe that would give me an excuse to pour all of this out. But my phone stayed silent. That evening I got home. She was there, sitting on the couch, flipping through mail. She looked up. "Hey," she said. I said, "Hey." She must have known by then, I figured. I mean, Greg had to have told her. But she acted normal. Maybe she wasn't sure what to say. Maybe she was waiting for me to accuse her so she could spin it differently. I tossed my keys on the table, mumbled something about a rough day. She nodded, didn't pry. We ate leftovers, quiet, the TV droning in the background. It felt like the calm before a storm. But the storm didn't come that night. The next day, I tried to hold it together. I told my boss I had a personal emergency, took a couple of days off. I needed space. I needed to think. She left for work again, no mention of anything. It was like we were living in parallel worlds, not crossing or colliding. I stayed home, paced the rooms. I stared at the wedding photos on the wall. Looked at the one from our 10th anniversary dinner. She was wearing those same gold earrings with the green stones. For a moment, I almost thought I could go back to not knowing. But then I remembered that smell in the car, that blanket I'd never seen, that slip of paper from a cheap motel. And how he'd smiled at me in the parking lot, like we were buddies. A week passed. She was probably waiting for me to bring it up. I was waiting for her to crack. Neither happened. Then, out of nowhere, my son told me something that shattered the final piece of my denial. I was in the kitchen, making a sandwich. He was at the table with crayons, doing some art project. He piped up in his little voice. "Mom took us to the park in that black car. You know, the one Uncle Greg drives." I froze, bread halfway to my mouth. I put the bread down, felt my chest tighten. "When was that?" I asked. He shrugged, said, "A couple days ago. She said it was easier. We got ice cream on the way home." I realized she'd used my time, my kids, and some other man's car to make her day easier. Or maybe they were just parading around in broad daylight, not caring if the kids talked about it. That moment, something inside me went from heartbreak to pure emptiness. It wasn't just some fling in secret. She was living a second life while I was at work or sitting in my house, oblivious. Using the kids like they were part of her daytime routine with him. Using my car sometimes, or his car, or whatever. It all blurred, and I saw how thoroughly I'd been erased from my own life. I didn't cry. Didn't yell. I just nodded at my son and said, "Thanks for telling me." He kept coloring, humming to himself. I stood there for a minute, looking at him. Then I left the room, went to the backyard, stared at the fence. The fence needed fixing, nails rusted through. I almost picked up a hammer. But my hands were shaking, so I slid them in my pockets and breathed in that stale air of defeat. Something had to give. That night, I confronted her. Or tried to. I was in our bedroom when she walked in, looking worn out. I asked, "Where were you today?" She paused, gave me a long look. "Work," she said quietly. I just stared at her. I watched her lips tremble like she wanted to add something. But she said nothing. So I said, "You could at least lie better." She turned away, faced the window. I thought maybe she'd cry or shout, but she just stood there. I could see the back of her neck tighten, her shoulders hunched like she was bracing for a hit. I didn't have anything else to say. After a minute, I walked out. I slept on the couch. In the morning, she was gone before I got up. We lived like strangers under the same roof, not saying the obvious. It was as if speaking it out loud would make it all too real. But I already knew it was real. Every time I closed my eyes, I pictured that earring on the floor, that motel receipt. It was truth, and it was sharp. I tried to keep it together for our son's sake. He was just a kid, not responsible for any of this. He could sense the tension, though. He asked me why Mom seemed so quiet. I said she was tired. He believed me for the moment. They believe what you tell them at that age, more or less. I went through the motions, ate when I felt hungry, slept in the guest room. I said good morning, said good night, but otherwise avoided talking to her. We were like co-workers passing each other in a hallway, nodding politely. She stayed out more in the evenings, or spent time in another part of the house. Sometimes she tried to break the silence with small talk. "We're out of milk," or "The water heater's acting up," but I barely grunted in response. In truth, I was planning my exit, my next steps. I was done being the fool who sits there while his wife carries on with another man. The final push came 2 weeks later. My son came home from a weekend with my in-laws, her mother, specifically. He mentioned seeing Greg's car outside the house there, too. That was the moment I realized the entire family was probably in on it, or at least they'd accepted it. My mother-in-law was letting this scumbag come over while my wife was there with the kids. Maybe she thought it was harmless or that it was none of my business. Maybe she encouraged it. I had no idea. But hearing that, I felt like I'd been carved out of the picture entirely. That night she and I argued. It started as a snappy exchange about our finances, a missing payment for something. Then it escalated. I told her I knew about the motel. She said it was just one time, a mistake, a confusion. She tried to blame it on me, said I'd been distant, unresponsive. My blood boiled. Then she half admitted there was more going on, but insisted. It's complicated. I told her I didn't care how complicated it was. She started crying, said she was sorry, but her tears felt hollow. She wasn't fighting for me. She wasn't asking for forgiveness. She just looked worn out and cornered. That night, I decided it was over. The life we had was done. But I didn't want to blow up the house or turn it into a soap opera. I wanted to disappear, make my moves quietly, set up the ultimate response. I looked at our finances, at the property in my name. Years ago, I'd acquired a piece of land from my side of the family, not huge, but big enough. We built her mother's house on it with some inheritance money she got. The deed ended up in my name because of how we arranged the finances at the time. No one thought it mattered. We were all family, right? But now that arrangement looked like a big, red button I could press if I wanted to. And I did want to. Not out of blind rage, but out of something deeper. A quiet need to strip away every safe corner they could hide in. She and Greg might keep meeting, keep driving around, keep living their daytime fantasy. But I wasn't going to leave them a warm nest. I made my plan. I quit my job first, which might sound crazy, but I couldn't focus at work. I handed in my resignation, saying I had family issues. My boss tried to talk me out of it, offered time off. I said no, thanks. I just needed a clean break. Then I started preparing for a property sale. I talked to a few real estate contacts. The land wasn't prime or anything, but it had that house on it, the one her mother lived in. I set a price lower than average, told them I needed a quick transaction. They lined up some potential buyers in no time. Meanwhile, I barely spoke to my wife. She noticed something was shifting, but she couldn't pin it down. She asked me once, "Are you leaving me?" I said, "It's too late for that question." She looked at me, eyes hollow, but she didn't beg. I think maybe she was half relieved. The guilt must have been eating her up. Or maybe she just wanted to move on with him. Who knows? I didn't ask. A few weeks of paperwork and phone calls, and I had a buyer. The deal was legal, binding, fully above board. My signature was all that mattered. My wife had no clue until the day the papers were finalized. Then the clock started ticking for her mother's eviction. It was part of the contract. I didn't see her mother in person during that process. I didn't see her tears, but I heard about them. I heard she was calling my wife, calling everyone, saying I'd gone off the deep end, that I was heartless, that I was destroying the family. Maybe I was. But that family was already dead to me. They cut me out the moment they let that man step into my role. My mother-in-law, my wife, Greg, they had their own circle. So I left them all behind. The day the eviction took place, I drove by once, kept my distance. Saw the trucks loading up furniture. Saw her mother standing there, wiping her eyes with a handkerchief. The front steps, the foundation stones, everything was being peeled apart. I felt strange. Not happy, not sad. Numb. Just watched as they loaded the last few boxes. I knew she'd have to find somewhere else to live. I didn't care. She never cared how her daughter's affair was ripping me to shreds. Let her fend for herself now. It sounds cold, but that's how I felt. My wife tried to call me that evening, left messages. I let them go unanswered. I heard her voice trembling on the voicemail saying, "My mom's losing her home. Please, can we talk?" I didn't return the call. She texted me once, asked if I was proud of myself. I stared at that text for a long time. I typed back, "Not proud, not sorry." Then I turned off my phone for the rest of the night. I lined up a different place to stay. Not a fancy spot, just a small rental outside town. I slept there most nights, only going back to the main house if I needed to pick up mail or see my son. I told my son I was working out of town a lot. He seemed confused, but I gave him a hug and told him not to worry. I hated lying, but he was too young for all this. I couldn't figure out how to explain that his mom's side of the family was unraveling in front of us. In those quiet days, I sank into a kind of solitude I'd never felt. The anger had melted into a calm that scared me. I wasn't punching walls or screaming at the mirror. I was just done. The next steps were divorce papers, property division, all the legal stuff. The day I sat down with a lawyer, I realized how far gone I was from the man I used to be. I used to believe in second chances, in communication, in working things out. But you can't work it out when one side has already set the house on fire and is dancing in the flames. I told the lawyer, I want a fair split, except for the land. That's sold. Non-negotiable. He nodded, took notes. He didn't ask for details. Probably seen it all before. Meanwhile, I learned from a neighbor that my wife, soon-to-be ex-wife, spent some nights at Greg's place, or with her mom in a motel, or at a relative's. I didn't keep track. I'd see her once in a while when we had to discuss something about our son, but it was always short, clipped. She looked like she'd aged 5 years in a matter of weeks. Her hair had lost its shine, her eyes were ringed with fatigue. Maybe she finally realized what she'd done. Maybe it was regret or heartbreak. Maybe she was missing me, or maybe she was missing the comfort of our old life. I wasn't sure. I didn't ask. I kept seeing the same images in my head, that earring on the car floor, the receipt from the motel. The 2 punches to Greg's face in the parking lot. My son saying, Mom took us for ice cream in Greg's car. Those pictures played in my mind on repeat. It felt like a loop, reminding me why I was doing all this. I knew some folks would say I went too far, that I should have just walked away quietly, let her mother keep the house. But that wasn't me. I needed a final statement, a way to cut them off at the knees so I could walk away free, or at least freer than I'd been. Some nights I'd get flashes of doubt. Was I too harsh? Was it fair to punish her mother that way? But then I'd remember how easily they erased me from their daily lives, how quick they were to bring Greg into my kids' routine. That thought extinguished any guilt I felt. They'd made their choices. I made mine. The day I saw the moving trucks tear into the foundation of that house, I didn't smile, but I felt something settle in me. Like a knot in my chest loosened. I watched stones and old beams get carried away. A part of me recognized the finality of it. There'd be no going back to what we had. That place used to host Thanksgiving dinners, used to hold birthday parties for the kids. Now it was just rubble. People would call me heartless. Let them. I was past caring. After the sale, I wrapped up more paperwork for the divorce. We didn't have a fancy lawyer battle. She was too tired, or maybe too ashamed, to drag it out. She signed what I put in front of her, as long as the basics were fair. We agreed on child support, on custody schedules. She didn't fight me for more, probably because she knew I had the evidence of her affair. Part of me felt a twinge of sadness when I remembered how we'd once talked about growing old together, traveling when the kids moved out. All that was dust now. I moved out officially. Grabbed my clothes, a few personal things. Left behind anything that felt tainted by this betrayal. No dramatic scene in the driveway, no shouting match. I locked the door behind me, put my key on the kitchen table. She was out somewhere, maybe with him, maybe at a friend's. I didn't care. I just left. I spent 3 months in a kind of fog, pulling together documents, closing joint accounts. I had enough savings to keep me afloat for a while. I drove around aimless, spent time at cheap motels, found gigs here and there. Eventually, I stumbled into a job driving trucks, hauling loads across state lines. It was good for me. Gave me space, the hum of the engine, the quiet of the cab at night. I'd park at rest stops, watch the lights of passing cars flicker on the highway. Sometimes, when I couldn't sleep, I'd think about what I did. I'd replay that moment in the parking lot, hitting Greg. People might say violence never solves anything, but for me, it wasn't about solving. It was about not exploding in the middle of a heartbreak. And that property sale, maybe it looked vindictive from the outside, but it felt like the only way to cut out the cancer. I needed them all to feel the weight of what they'd done, not just me. Because when they used my car to sneak away, or took my kids for ice cream like it was normal, they were using my life as a prop for their affair. That was the final insult I couldn't swallow. So I took away their safety. It was blunt and harsh, but so was their betrayal. There were nights I wondered if I should have just confronted them all in a single room, laid it all out. But that would have become a circus of yelling, tears, denials. I couldn't do that to my kids. Instead, I let the legal process do the talking. Sold the land, forced them off it, ended the marriage. Cold and systematic. Every so often, I'd get a text from an unknown number, probably the mother-in-law, or maybe some relative cussing me out. I ignored them. I'd see old photos on social media, if I bothered to look, showing my wife, ex-wife now, smiling with the kids, trying to pretend life was normal. But I didn't comment. I was out of that picture. A few months after it all settled, my son asked to see me. I picked him up, took him to a diner. He was quiet at first, pushing fries around on his plate. I asked him how he was. He said, "Mom cries a lot. Grandma's living in an apartment." I nodded. He looked up at me with big eyes. "Why did you do that?" he asked, meaning the house. He was old enough to sense the tension, but not old enough to grasp the full betrayal. I took a deep breath. I said, "Sometimes grown-ups hurt each other. It's not your fault." He looked away, blinked back tears. I felt like the biggest jerk in the world right then. But I couldn't fix it. I couldn't say, "It's going to be okay," because maybe it wouldn't be. Instead, I said, "I love you. That doesn't change." He nodded, tears in his eyes, and I just held his hand for a minute. I dropped him off at his mom's later. She didn't say much to me, just a tight nod. Greg wasn't around. Maybe they were still together, or maybe it fizzled out. I didn't care enough to ask. I drove off, staring at the empty street. That was the day I realized how much damage had been done to us all. But it was too late to repair it. I stayed in that cycle for a while, driving trucks, picking up my son on weekends, ignoring the rest of that old life. The divorce was final. The property was gone. Her mother, from what I heard, moved in with a cousin somewhere. I tried not to keep track. When the phone rang, I answered only if it was my son. If it was an unknown number, I let it go to voicemail. My ex-wife texted me a few times about scheduling or money. I answered politely, no more, no less. We didn't talk about feelings or regrets. We just did the bare minimum to handle what was needed for the kid. In that emptiness, I learned to live with myself. I rented a small place near the highway, close enough to make it to the truck yard. My neighbors didn't know me, didn't ask questions. I liked it that way. I'd come home from a run at 2 in the morning, footsteps echoing in the empty corridor. Close the door behind me. Maybe eat some microwave dinner, watch a little late-night TV, then pass out on the couch. Day after day, that's how it went. I didn't drink. I didn't invite anyone over. Not because I was punishing myself. I just didn't want to connect with anyone. There was a peace in silence. Sometimes I'd think back to the moment I first realized the truth, the earring, the receipt, the smell of perfume. It replayed like a short movie clip in my mind. I'd wonder if I'd do it all again, hit Greg, sell the property, tear down the house. The answer always came back the same, yes. Because they wrote me off the moment they decided my life was theirs to use for cover. They took my trust, my time, even my kids' routine, and twisted it into some dirty secret. I couldn't let that slide. I wasn't proud of it, but I wasn't ashamed either. It just was. People do extreme things when they're betrayed. Maybe I went too far. But I can't say I regret it. I'd rather live with the consequences of my own choices than keep swallowing the lies they fed me. Sometimes, that's all a man has left, his own sense of what's necessary. It's been a while now. Enough time for the dust to settle. I still drive trucks, mostly night shifts. The hum of the tires on the road, the glow of headlights, something about it keeps me calm. No one's around to ask me how I'm doing, no forced conversation about the weather or sports. I just follow the routes, make my deliveries, catch some sleep in my cab when I can. I still talk to my son regularly, see him on weekends. He's adapting. Kids bounce back faster than we do, but I know he's got scars, questions. I answer what I can without unloading too much. He's old enough now that he's piecing together the story. Maybe one day, he'll read between the lines and see how deep the wounds went. For now, I try to be the stable one. When I pick him up, I'm never late. I don't promise anything I can't keep. That's more than I can say for some. My ex-wife moved on, I guess. We don't talk about her personal life, and she doesn't ask about mine. I heard from a mutual friend she's no longer with Greg. Maybe it was just a fling that couldn't survive the consequences. Or maybe they still sneak around. It's not my business anymore. Sometimes I see her at my son's school events. We stand on opposite sides of the gym, share a glance. It's not hatred or anger. It's more like emptiness, acceptance that the bond we had is gone. People sometimes ask me if I hate her. I don't. Hate takes a lot of energy. I'm just done. If I'd let hate keep boiling, I might have destroyed myself. Instead, I let those feelings burn out when I sold that property, when I watched them cart away the rocks from the foundation. That was my closure, as twisted as it sounds. I know it cost her mother a home, but I can't bring myself to feel sorry. In a way, I see it as leveling the field. They took my house, my life, and turned it upside down. I returned the favor. I haven't been with anyone else. Not because I don't believe in relationships, but because trust is a fragile thing. I had it once and watched it collapse in an afternoon. Maybe someday I'll open up again. I'm not holding my breath. For now, I like my own company. I like to wake up in a quiet space, knowing nobody's sneaking around behind my back. I don't mind the stillness. Some folks are scared of being alone at 50, but it doesn't bother me. It's peaceful, in a way. Sometimes I flash back to the day I punched Greg. I see the look of shock on his face, blood trickling down his nose. I don't feel proud, but I remember the sense of release. It was like my body needed to do something to keep my mind from blowing up. I guess that's what violence is sometimes, a short circuit for the pain. I'm not advocating it, but I won't pretend I regret it. We all have limits. When I'm on the road late at night, I think about how quickly your whole life can flip. 1 minute, you're climbing into a car to grab a folder your wife forgot. The next minute, you're standing there with your heart dropping into your stomach because you found proof she's been sleeping with someone else. It still makes my head spin if I dwell on it too long. So usually, I keep my mind focused on the route, on traffic patterns, on the next rest stop. That's enough to get me through the miles. I see my daughter from time to time, too. She's older, out of the house, more aware of the situation. She asked me once if I'd consider forgiving her mom. I told her, I don't hate her, but I'm not going back. She nodded, said she understood. She still visits her mom, sees her grandma in that new apartment. I don't discourage it. They're her family, too. My only request is she keeps me out of their drama. She respects that. We keep our relationship separate. We have a quiet dinner once in a while. She tells me about college, about her classes. I listen. I try to be supportive. That's the best I can do. People think time heals everything, but I don't buy that. Time just dulls the edges. The memory's still there, like a scar you can trace with your fingertips. It doesn't bleed anymore, but you can feel the ridges, remember how you got it. I live with it now. No use denying it. I learned you can't outrun the past, but you can keep it at arm's length. I don't regret selling that land. I don't regret forcing them out. Some nights, when I wake up in my cramped truck cab, my neck stiff, I close my eyes and see the rubble where that house used to stand. I see the tears on her mother's face. I imagine my ex-wife's expression when she realized what I'd done. A part of me wonders if that was too cruel. But each time, I recall how they took my trust, my loyalty, and used them like a doormat. So, yes, I'd do it again. Might sound harsh, but that's the truth. I'd rather be the man who fought back than the man who let himself be walked all over. I'm not out here preaching revenge. I'm just saying that when your life implodes, you'll do things you never expected. And once they're done, there's no going back. That's how I got here, living alone, driving trucks, sleeping out hours. It's not the life I pictured for myself at this age, but it's what I've got. And in its own way, it's all right. No one's lying to me, no one's expecting me to pretend everything's okay. I have my own space, my own rules. Every so often, an old friend calls, asks if I'm all right, suggests we grab a beer. I usually pass. I'm not big on small talk, especially not about the divorce. I don't want sympathy or pity. I just want to keep going, mile after mile, day after day, until this story becomes less sharp in my mind. Maybe it never fully fades. That's fine. It's part of who I am now. Sometimes I park my truck near a rest stop and lean on the hood, looking at the stars. The sky's quiet, the road hums with distant engines. I think about that day they drove off in my car to a motel, the day I found the earring and the receipt. I think about how they basically erased me, made me invisible. Then I remind myself, I erased them right back. It wasn't pretty, but it was the only way I knew how to stand my ground. Would I do it differently if I had a second chance? Hard to say. But I can tell you I don't wish for any other outcome. What happened, happened. I'm still here, breathing, standing. That's enough for me now. And if I ever forget why I made those choices, I just remember the thick smell of perfume in my own car, the motel slip in the ashtray, and my boy saying, "Mom took us on a ride in Greg's black car." That was the moment they wrote me off. That was the moment I stopped caring about what happened to them. Now I'm free, at least in the sense that I owe them nothing. Not my explanations, not my apologies. And I'm okay with that. I'll keep the engine running, keep driving through the night, let the highway lines guide me forward. Because that's all that's left to do, and I'm the one who gets to decide what my life looks like now. No more illusions. Just the open road and the sound of my own thoughts. That's how I live. And it's honest.